Okay. Hello, everyone. This is our first of three um, workshops on writing an op-ed for science policy. And in this first one, we'll go over the importance of op-eds and choosing a topic. And this is presented to you by Allegheny Science Policy and Governance, where science policy and community intersect. And you can find us on social media or email us if you have any questions. And so just as an introduction, here's everyone who will be helping out with this event. I'm John Klonowski. I'm the president of ASPG, and I'm in the Integrated Systems Biology program, which is kind of just computational biology and regular biology put together, trying to train people who are competent and well-versed in both biology and computational kind of biology. And does everyone else want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Uchenna Mbawike. I'm a Master's of Public Policy and Management candidate at Gaspia Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, also Advocacy Chair for ASPG. And I'll be doing the second workshop series that John will allude to towards the end of his talk today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alice. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at the Department of Health Policy and Management, the School of Public Health, and I'll be leading the final workshop in this series, focusing on sci communication and the outline of an op-ed. Thanks for coming.
And then our final person who's working kind of behind the scenes a little bit, and she hasn't joined us today, is Alex Lee, and she's at the Center of Neuroscience at UPitt, also a PhD candidate. And so I'm going to start with a little introduction on science communications and why it's important. And it's mainly because there's this striking trend in the hard scientists of two different languages, and yeah, it's kind of a creation within academia of an esoteric language that can only be understood by those within the institution, and sometimes just within a particular field. I think we've all encountered trying to read a paper from another field and just kind of Googling Googling words and jargon every few minutes, and really struggling to understand something that is within the umbrella of your field, but maybe a more specific or differentiated focus. And so really what science communication tries to do is try to break down those barriers where the public can understand and engage in science, instead of presenting science as something that's complex and inaccessible and requiring unobtainable knowledge. And kind of an example of that, a simple one, of why Sci-Com is important is, I have an example where you might want to explain COVID-19 to a non-scientist as a biomedical researcher. And maybe their question is how can a respiratory virus cause loss of smell and possibly neurological symptoms? So as a biological researcher or biomedical researcher, I would go into the literature about COVID and see what I can find. And so searching papers on COVID and loss of smell and neurological symptoms, I would come up with this paper: non-neuronal expression of SARS-CoV-2 entry genes in the olfactoral system suggest mechanisms underlying COVID-19 associated insomnia. And already here, there's a few concepts that are foreign, that would be foreign to the non-biomedical researcher. Particularly, maybe the strongest example is the difference between SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, where SARS-CoV-2 is the actual strain of virus, and COVID-19, which is a set of clinical symptoms associated with infection by SARS-CoV-2. Also knowing what anosmia is, which is the loss of smell, and maybe even, olfactoral system, which is what the system used for smell. And yeah, but so let's get past that. Let's say someone understands, okay, this is about smell and SARS and COVID-19. Well, even the abstract, trying to read the abstract for a non-biomedical researcher can be very difficult. Trying to understand what the conclusion is and why and how the conclusion is put together can be really difficult. And so to kind of understand this abstract, which essentially says how the COVID-19 can affect the olfactoral system and gain access into the brain and neurological system, we need a lot of things. There's a lot of barriers. Access to journals, understanding of cell biology and its jargon, understanding of genetics and genomics and its jargon, as well as understanding the biomedical hypothesis testing process, like how model organisms are used and what constitutes strong evidence and weak evidence. And especially when it comes to access to quality journals, the importance of that is that sometimes lower quality journals, or which are maybe free, or access to preprint journals can lead to misinformation or disinformation, as well as when we speak in this jargon, things can be misunderstood or not properly understood, and that can lead to misinformation amongst the population or the general population. So an example of that is this paper that ended up being withdrawn from bioRxiv, which is a preprint journal, and it was about uncanny similarity of unique inserts in the 19N spike protein to HIV, GP120 and GAG. And so this was not solid science, but to someone who only has access to like free journals or something like this can easily fuel and be used as fuel for misinformation or disinformation, saying that there's some connection to HIV and COVID, that they're the same virus, that it's engineered by someone or some government to cause harm. So really, why is this important? Is because we as a scientific community are trying to use science communication to build trust and convince others. And so being inaccessible and incomprehensible drives distrust and misinformation. And building trust and convincing others takes, a number of different things, listening to the other side and their values, placing information in terms of other people's values, speaking in an understandable way, and repeated interaction. And so there's two routes that we can take as scientists in order to facilitate science communication. One is within science, and so pushing for changes within science, such as publishing in open access journals, mandatory lay abstract and summary. So having a technical and then a lay abstract. So if someone is accessing your publication, they don't need a high level, a high level of understanding of your particular field to understand something. Speaking with journalists and making yourself available for journalists and news, sharing and releasing results. So whether that's like on a lab page or sharing things on Twitter, and then mentoring others within the field. And the second route is the one we're going to focus on here, and that's as a scientist acting in another capacity, such as advocating or lobbying through the interaction with policymakers. Being a teacher, and mentoring people outside of the field. So visiting a classroom, going to kind of local events, giving lab tours, things like that. You know, being kind of just being a friend and, you know, sharing science with non-scientists directly and not being afraid of kind of discussing science and scientific topics with those who aren't in the field. And finally, being a journalist, and which is what we're going to focus on today, writing an op-ed. You know, there's other ways as well, but we're going to focus today and on this session about writing an op-ed. And so anyone can act in any of these capacities. Yes. So the op-ed writing process, I'm just going to overview it right here, is, you know, first coming up with the idea and doing your research around a particular idea that you want to impact, writing about the idea, and then using that for some sort of advocacy or service. And in the context here of the advocacy and service is publishing the op-ed, but there are other, you can even take that further, and we'll just touch on it, but not focus on it here. In this workshop, we'll be focused on just getting you to an idea, research, writing, and publishing that. Yeah. So with this first step is kind of finding the idea. And here are some of the ways to do so. Whether it's, yeah. So newspaper can give ideas about pertinent issues. And so you want to find an issue that matches your interests with your knowledge and expertise, and taking that interest, knowledge, and expertise and finding kind of a pertinent issue that needs to be addressed within a particular community. So one of those ways is read your local or state newspaper. So I'm from Chicago, and so I would look at the Chicago Sun-Times, and we can see here that, you know, there's already something, at least two topics that we can kind of talk about, whether it's marijuana legalization or it's criminal justice system and kind of use of technology or data or in the criminal justice system. And also, this is important because we'll be publishing our op-eds in these newspapers, and legislators will pay attention to their local media to keep track of the issues that are important to their constituency, you know, whether that be on a local or state or even national level. Government websites can also give us a clue for issues and activity of like what issues is there currently activity on, because it's always important to address things are on people's minds and that people are concerned with. I mean, it's always great to kind of keep in tune with the less known issues, but especially when publishing for a general audience, usually there's a small subset of things that are in people's mind and that are currently being worked on. Even in DC, yeah, things oftentimes are reactionary. You know, a lot of the legislation being passed even on a federal level is very reactionary, not very like planned and concerted long-term efforts and analyzing. So that's why reading kind of these government websites and what's happening and visiting those websites to see what's going on is a good way to get an idea of things. So here I would look at the Chicago local government like website and look at what's going on. And so, you know, the next thing is looking at community advocacy groups, and they're a good resource. So who in your area is doing what? And a lot, yeah. So there was recently, you know, you can look up local organizations or non-for-profits. Recently there was like a engagement community conference that Pitt held. And so one of the presentations was from this organization, the Black Environmental Collective, and they fight for air and water air and water pollution legislation and activity. And then, here's a link to the PIT Office of Engagement and Community Affairs. And this is our almost second to last one, but this is kind of outside the scope a little bit. We're going to really focus on kind of looking at newspapers, government websites, and local and nonprofits, but you can also attend public meetings. You're on the website, a local government website or a state government website. They often issue notices about meetings on particular topics, and you can hear what exactly people are saying. And finally is connecting with local leaders and elected representatives. They'll often hold community meetings, on their websites. They'll talk about issues that concern them. You can find out who's your allies and who's your enemies. So these are kind of some of the ways that we can get in and research things. Obviously, the easiest way is Google, but what are you going to Google? How are you going to find topics? And these are kind of really good ways. So once again, that's reading the papers that you want to publish in, visiting local government websites, and looking up local organization and nonprofit to see what's going on in your area of choice. So once again, this is a process. I just want to, before we get into the actual workshopping section, I just want to give one more, I want to give an example of how this process can be used, and how the process has been used before to actually enact change. And so I took this from ESOL, which is Engineers and Scientists Acting Locally, but they had this really good example, and I was like, I'll show it. So there's two bioengineering PhD candidates from Rice University in Texas. They saw that there was 2 cycling deaths near campus at a particular intersection. So what they did was they attended council meetings to give public comment, and they put together and presented data that they collected on intersection crossing times. Their advocacy and attendance at these events actually led to changes in signal timing, crosswalk visibility, and increased signage. And pretty much taking an idea, doing research, putting together some sort of writing and action, and moving the needle. But here we're mostly going to be focused, while you can kind of take your op-ed further, here in this workshopping session, we'll be just focusing on writing. And so this leads us to the first workshopping session. Actually, this leads us to the workshopping session, and that is grouping up, finding a group of people to work with or working alone, and idea generation. And so when you're generating idea in this first step, you want to find, once again, this topic of interest, knowledge, and relative expertise. You want to choose a scope. So is this local, state, federal, international? This will also help identify what papers you want to send your op-ed to. Yes. And identifying the importance and pertinence of your topic to your scope. Because if you want to talk about climate change and how it affects, let's say, marshlands, you wouldn't necessarily be sending it to Californian newspapers because they don't have very many marshlands out there. Or if you're worried about air and water pollution in Lake Michigan, you'd probably be focusing on the area around the Great Lakes. So here we're gonna break up into group, and I'll leave this up. You can also screenshot it just in case it goes away. And these are just like some topics you might be interested in, and we will break you off into a couple groups. Actually, yeah, Alice is gonna make a couple breakout rooms, and then you can choose one to join?
Well, I think since there's like not a ton of participants, maybe we can just sort of maybe you guys can talk a little bit about your interests, and it'd be nice to hear at this time like what you're hoping to get out of the workshop series, some ideas that you've been thinking about, just to give us a sense of how we can maybe try to find ways in future sessions, including this one, how to like help you guys. So I don't know whichever one, Fariel or Tanupat, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. If you guys want to share a little bit about what you were hoping to write about, that'd be helpful.
I think right now I am interested in anti-vaxxer of COVID vaccine because I'm from Thailand actually, and I'm in a social group that talk about how vaccines, conspiracy theories, something like that, that there are nanobots in vaccine that can harm everyone and can cause like a DNA damage, make mutations and many stuffs. So I'm interested in talking with these people, and I have tried to talk to them, like I show them science articles that scientists have done about the efficacy of the vaccine and the risk of it, and but they don't believe. They just ignore them. I don't know how that I can communicate to them that and influence them in this topic. That's all. Yep.
Great. Yeah, very important and timely for sure. Thanks for sharing. Fariel, do you want to speak about the topic that or topics you're interested in?
Thinking something along the lines of health literacy and healthcare access.
Great. Okay. Well, I think like I'm happy to
I
stick
think
with
Uchenna also wanted to share.
Oh, sorry. My bad. Yes, Uchenna, please feel free. Sorry for
No, it's all good. John had sent me a message in the thing. So I will probably do a couple of op-eds. So one I'll do for sure on my research, my capstone research, which is on a research ethics focus on people who enter research studies, making sure they're compensated fairly. So I mean, to John's point, and this is a question I actually have for you, John, I kind of already have an idea of exactly what I want to write about, but it's not going to be sort of what you said, which is like, what are the local trending issues? So how do you sort of, guide people in that sort of navigation in that sense, where it's like, I know that I want to have a strong opinion about these things, but it may not be really in the news right now. How do I sort of navigate to find resources where I can put my opinions out there?
Yeah, definitely. So I think you would definitely be targeting like kind of publications that speak to other scientists, obviously. So that'd be like one thing, and that's a good way to make an impact. But yeah, I would just, if it's not an issue that is on like everyone's mind currently, I would connect it or present how it would impact a something that's going on currently. So yeah, that's kind of what I might do. So find a topic that's related and talk about how your particular issue would impact that, and use that as a starting point. And then I think going back to Tanupat, in terms of like convincing others and building trust, I'll just bring like this because we have spoken about that topic before. but really like some of the things is like actually trying to understand the opposite side's values and then placing your information in terms of the other person's values. Because if you're saying something about and it's based on, you know, a different set of values, then that other person won't understand because those values aren't particularly important to them. Yeah, and then repeated interaction is a really big one. So there's we actually had a psych major present to us, and he showed that it'll never be enough to just talk to someone once. It's really about repeat interaction or interacting and focusing on people closest to you. But with that said, yeah, we would love to help out. And if you know, put something together for, you know, a publication even for Thailand, you know, something in a Thai publication, we would be so down to have that. Or you can join something else. With that said, Alice, how do you think we should proceed?
Again, I think because we have a pretty intimate group here, we don't necessarily have to use the breakout rooms. So I'm gonna suggest that. And I guess in terms of the rest of the meeting, this is sort of what we thought would be more unstructured time, where you know, you guys sort of talk out loud to us and to each other about the ideas you're interested in, and sort of like how best we might be able to help you, especially as we sort of like proceed with the workshop 2 and 3, which kind of go a little more detail into how to construct a persuasive thesis or argument as sort of like the central focal point of your op-ed, and then sort of like how do you put together all the ingredients that make up an op-ed in terms of you know, what is the structure of an op-ed? What kinds of data and evidence do you draw from to sort of really prop up your argument? How do you form counter arguments that will strengthen what you're trying to say? So I guess in terms of the intro meeting, again, would love to hear from you guys in terms of like what other questions that you want to discuss with us, what other resources that would be helpful. But I think it might be helpful just to kind of continue the conversation of not only what do you want to write about, but you know, what is your central argument? Who is your audience? So it sounds like Tanopat, your central audience might be is it to other researchers? Is it to sort of like a general audience in terms of addressing like public opinion on anti-vax conspiracies? Do you have like, oh, okay, I see a question in the chat. Yeah, so I maybe that'd be helpful for to just talk a little bit about your audience and your targeted publication.
For me, this is a general population. Most scientists, like they know how to read articles, and maybe they know more about vaccine than me. But this one, I think, is like a group of people who like doesn't trust in science and vaccine.
Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe I'm gonna jump on what John was talking about earlier about if you're really trying to be persuasive to people who don't seem to like really believe in the effectiveness or the safety of the vaccine, and they sort of believe that it might be harmful, it might be a good idea to just like address the values, right? Like, why do they think this way? What are some of the barriers that get in the way of them believing? Why, like what makes the conspiracy? Why do they believe in the conspiracy theories? What is like some of the I guess underlying reasons or values driving that kind of thinking? And then similarly, what are some of the reasons that they don't believe in the safety of the vaccine? I think those would be two things to consider as you're sort of like fleshing out your op-ed. John, what do you think? Or what do others think?
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of brings me to that. So, and we, we'll talk again with the idea with Faryal, but that brings to like the research kind of part of things, which is what we hope you'll do between now and our next session. We'll keep talking after this. I'll just finish up the presentation, but gathering basic information, so level of activity on the topic, with Tanupat's topic, it's obviously a lot of activity, and there's a wealth of information, and the problem would be more, what should I put in here, rather than do I have enough information to put in here? And it'll be really important to find a specific target audience. Something like the Thai community or something would be a great thing, because there's a lot of activity, but like what new thing can you bring to it? Why should someone publish your piece, or what additional information can you kind of provide, especially on a topic with this much activity? And so finding like a niche, and that's why local issues are really good for this type of stuff as well, is finding a niche that you can really target, and you can really that you understand a little bit more, doing something within your community where you understand what is the type of misinformation that is, and the reasons for the misinformation in that particular community. And yeah, so gathering the level of accessible information, is it easy or is it difficult? And then just like general information from both sides about the topic. And that will really address Faryal's question in looking for a place for resources that are credible. A lot of the times, you might not be sure. Obviously, there's very basic ways in terms of like where the information is coming from. Are they citing their sources, whatnot? But when you're looking at publication, there's actually a website where you can see their political leaning. And so that's what I was trying to do when I'm doing research, is that I'm accumulating information and I'm also recording what is the political lean. Because in that way, not only can you discern particular biases, but by making sure that you have research from different political leanings, you can actually be able to formulate like, what are the different positions, what are the values that those positions are coming from, and what might be a compromise or a way that you can sell something to everyone. And that, yeah, and so that really leads to my part B about the research step, is developing your understanding of points and counterpoints, identifying positions and their sources, and then who are your allies, who could you kind of see as your allies, and who are the particular enemies who are being destructive towards your cause. Yeah, so I'm gonna do the final slide, and then we can continue with questions and discussion. And then also you can use this time, we'll stick around to do research on your own, yeah, with people around for accountability. If you'd like to get started. So yeah, stay together, stay at the end to work together. And so next week, in next week's presentation, we'll talk about finalizing a topic. We'll develop a thesis around your topic, or we'll help you develop a thesis around your topic. Develop the key elements of what should be in an op-ed, and finally, being able to sell yourself and your idea, because in an op-ed, it's about who is writing and selling yourself to an audience that they should read your article and they should trust you and your idea. Yeah, and once again, this is our group and how to contact us. I'm gonna end the show and end the recording, and we can kind of chat more. You wanna end it, Alice?